One of the most important steps to starting your software development career is the interview that gets you your first programming job. Now, I've been a developer for around 10 years, and I've been both the interviewer and the interviewee, and I've seen some common mistakes crop up again and again with entry-level developers. Now, I know there's a lot of videos out on YouTube about interview prep and common interview mistakes, but I think these mistakes I'm going to cover are more specific to junior-level developers. The first mistake is what I'll call just being too picky about technology. I think a lot of recent grads or self-taught programmers will have some idea of what they want to do in the future when it comes to software development. And that's great. But a lot of times it'll be very difficult to find an entry-level job with the technology that you're looking for. And if you do find that, you're very lucky. The truth is, what you learn in your first 2, maybe 3 years of software development is much more important than the technology itself. And a lot of times you won't actually know what you like until you actually get in and start working on it. I know for me personally, what I thought I was going to be doing when I got out of school is I was going to do Erlang programming for businesses and just help with the business decisions and just doing these multi-threaded processes using Erlang. I was very interested in that. And that's not what I ended up doing at all. What I end up working on most of the time is actually Kotlin, and Kotlin didn't even really exist back when I graduated. So as long as the technology that you're primarily working on is used outside of just the one job you're working on, you're going to be just fine. You're going to learn so much that has to go beyond just the programming language or the framework that you're using. So if in the interview, if they say, oh, this job is mainly JavaScript, and you have just some bad feelings about JavaScript, it's going to be fine. Like you're going to be just fine. You might only stick around for 2 to 3 years, but you might find out that you actually like JavaScript more once you're using it correctly instead of just however you've been using it as a student. So just be really open-minded about which technologies you want to use in your first job, and definitely just have the attitude that you're willing to learn everything. Because as an entry-level person, you're not expected to know too much coming in. So if you just have this attitude that's like, oh yeah, great, I definitely want to learn JavaScript, that's going to go really far for you as far as getting your first programming job. The second biggest mistake I see is people not subscribing to my channel so they can receive more advice when it comes to starting your programming career. Wait, no, that's not actually correct. The second mistake I'll see is just people not really knowing the process of interviewing. So when you're interviewing for, say, a Java position, you should know all the common Java collections and things like that. You might not use a tree map ever in your career, or you might not have used it yet, but you should at least know what it is. So when the interviewer asks, hey, what's a tree map? You can give them a good answer. I've seen people get failed just for this reason. They could have been, perfectly fine, good programmers. They didn't know what a tree map was, and then that was it. They were filtered out, and it's just really unfortunate. Another thing to think about is a lot of these positions will have either whiteboard or coding problems that they want you to solve. They're usually data structure algorithms type problems. If you look around, there's a lot of people out there that will have a lot of bad feelings about these problems. But the fact is, a lot of companies use these. A lot of companies use these to decide whether or not they hire you. And it would just be in your best interest to just study hard and make sure that you can solve these types of problems. I know a lot of people will say that, oh yeah, these don't really show whether or not you can do the job and things like that. But something to consider is that Google has spent a lot of resources figuring out the best way to interview people, and they haven't come up with anything better yet. For now, these coding exercises are here to stay. Get on LeetCode, study up, and just try to have a good attitude if they send you up to the whiteboard to solve one of these problems. The third mistake I'll see is just a general unwillingness to do maintenance work. Now, this is usually a junior level developer who has 1 to 2 years experience and they're coming for their second job. But they'll say something like, oh, I want to leave my job because we're not doing new development anymore. We're just doing maintenance work and bug fixes and things like that. And I want to work on some new development. And there's a lot of problems with this. First off, after you've been on a project for, say, 6 months, it's going to be maintenance at that point. You might be building new features on top of it, but you're still going to be maintaining what you have already built. So even if you get on a project right when the project is brand new, you're going to be doing what feels like maintenance work soon enough. It's going to be in the back of the interviewer's mind. It's like, is this person going to just leave as soon as we get the project somewhat stable? I don't know if I want somebody that's going to leave within 6 months. Just not really a great attitude to have. Another thing is, when it comes to architecture, architecting a new app, somebody who only has like 1 to 2 or even 0 years experience, they're not going to really have the experience of what it takes to build out the app. It might either be over-engineered, under-engineered. They just won't have the experience that you need to build a new app from scratch. And the third thing is maintenance is just awesome. Like, doing maintenance is great. Like, you'll either fix a bug that users keep running into and they keep crashing. You might just make the app a little bit faster and that's going to make the users happy. Or you might just improve the code quality. You might be improving the code quality so your fellow programmers, when they have to use a class, it's just going to be much more enjoyable for them to use the tools that they have. You'll be able to make tangible improvements to the current project. When you're first building something brand new that hasn't existed before, the chance of people even liking it is actually pretty low. Even if you go and you build exactly what the designer had, it's going to have to pass through so many people before it actually gets to the user. There's going to be a lot of feedback and a lot of people that will either like it or not like it. It might just be polarized and there'll be a lot of fighting. But when it comes to, oh, I fixed this crash, it's like everybody's going to be happy if you fix a crash, no matter what. So I think you should just have the mentality that, you know, doing maintenance and just trying to make the app as good as it can possibly be is actually something great. It's something that you should definitely strive for. And anytime you're jumping on an application, they're not going to have you just starting to make new features right away. The first task they're going to probably have is having you do maintenance so you can just get the lay of the land and really understand how the app works and things like that. If you have to say why you're leaving your job, just make up anything else. Anything else is better than, oh, you know, I just really didn't want to do maintenance work anymore. So the fourth thing I'm going to call misrepresenting yourself on your resume. Now, a common mistake you'll see people say is, oh, don't lie on your resume because you'll be found out soon enough and then you're not going to get the job or you're going to get fired soon after you get hired. You know, of course you shouldn't do that. But something I'll see entry-level people do is they'll list everything that they learned in school, but they'll list things that they may have learned a few years ago and then they're not really willing to discuss when it comes to an interview. So maybe you took a class in finite automata or something. If you don't want to talk about that in an interview, you really shouldn't list that on your resume because they might just come up and say, hey, you know, do you ever solve any problems using finite machines? At best, it's just going to make you more nervous for the rest of the interview. And you don't want to start off on the wrong foot when it comes to something like that. And at worst, they might just be like, oh yeah, this person, if they didn't even know this one thing they have listed, how can we trust them about anything they have listed on their resume? It's really best to only put things on your resume that you're either an expert in or you're just willing to talk about and answer a few questions about. The fifth mistake is just shutting down. A lot of times when you get to an interview, they'll ask you a lot of questions and you won't know all of them. You might, but usually you won't know them all. A lot of times I'll see junior level developers get asked a question they don't really know. And then instead of just bouncing back and just saying, oh yeah, like how would you do it? And then just keep trying and keep trying to get the next one right and things like that, they'll just completely shut down. And for the rest of the interview, they'll just be all nervous and they might even get questions wrong that they should actually know. And then when it'll get to the end of the interview, they'll just be a complete mess. And it all just happened because they didn't know that one question. It's obviously not a great feeling to not know the answer to everything, but you have to realize that it's common and you just have to bounce back from it and hopefully you know the next one. And I've had interviews where they asked me a lot of difficult questions. I didn't know most of them and you know, it still went all right. Like it was just like the first interview and it's like, oh, you got through to the second round. And I was surprised, but it can happen. It can absolutely happen. Just try your best. And if you don't know something, like it's fine. Like it's totally fine, especially if you're applying for an entry-level job. They're not going to expect you to know everything. Try to just take a deep breath after you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, and you'll be fine. The sixth problem that I'll see is just not having a good answer to the question of, oh, why do you want to work here specifically? I know it's kind of ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that programmers get asked this, because I always think it's like, do plumbers get asked when say a plumber gets a job at a hospital where they ask, oh, are you passionate about healthcare? It's like, no, it's like, can this plumber fix our plumbing issue? That's it. And when it comes to programming, it's like, oh, I just want to work on a good team with good programmers and, you know, make a good product. But you just always have to have this answer up your sleeve, no matter what. And it's stupid, but it just is what it is. So I think sometimes, like, if you're at Google and they ask this and you're like, oh yeah, it's Google, like, obviously I want to work here. Like, I've never worked at Google, but I'm sure that'll be a good answer. But for pretty much every other job, you need to have some sort of answer to that. So something I just want to conclude with is, while the job is looking to see if you would be a good match for this job, in the back of your mind, you should be thinking, am I even a good match for this job? do I even want to work here? It is really tough. When you're going for your entry-level job, it's like, oh, I just want literally any job, and anytime you don't get a job, it's a huge bummer. But I'm just thinking back to when I was first looking at jobs. There was a local company, and this was for just like a C# development job, just a C#.net development job. No problem at all. Entry level, don't need any experience. You're going to be good. And they asked me just like a really difficult chemistry question. And it was like, I hadn't taken chemistry since high school. So like, why would they even ask me this? And I didn't know it. And then, like I said before, it's like the shutting down. Like I ended up shutting down because it's like, I didn't know this chemistry problem. Nowhere on my resume to say that. And my interview ended up going really poorly from that point on. It was a really stupid interview looking back, but it just went really poorly. And then I didn't end up getting the job, and I was really bummed out about that. But like looking back, it's like, I bet it would have been terrible to work there. It would have just been absolutely horrible. People in charge just be like, oh yeah, ask them chemistry problems. And it's like, it's not even a place that you're doing chemistry. Like it's one thing when people are asking like these like data structures and algorithms questions. It's like, yeah, that's just part of getting a job as a programmer. But asking something completely off the wall, it was pretty ridiculous. And I'm really glad that I didn't get that job. So yeah, so just in a way, everything happens for a reason. Like eventually if you keep working at it, you keep building out your portfolio, you keep applying to jobs, eventually you're going to get that entry level position. And that's all I have for this video. You can comment below. What is the worst interview question you've ever got? Just what is the worst interview question you've ever gotten? Have a great day, and I will see you next week.